Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke, coming to you from Seattle, Washington.
Zach, feels like it's been a while because you've been away. Well, we had Reimagine, had lots of busyness, and then you've been in Innsbruck.
That's right. Yeah. I just got back. I did a little interim stop in New York City for a few days, but just got back last night from that trip. It was really fun. Innsbruck is just such an amazing and gorgeous city in the Tyrolean Alps in Austria. And actually, my first International Passive House Conference was in Innsbruck back in 2011. So now, 13 years later, it returned, and it was really wonderful, connecting with great people again, and seeing a lot of retrofit work, both at the smaller scale. So Michael Ingui and Kevin Brennan presented about the 16 Grace Court Alley carriage house interfit retrofit there, which was a great presentation and very well received. And then there was also a lot of larger scale retrofit work that was being presented and shared, particularly around the outfit initiative that PHI, Passive House Institute, is involved in. So great stuff.
Yeah. Hopefully we get to talk more about outfit because that's a pretty, I guess I've heard it described as Passive House response to Energy Sprung, sort of a way of prefabricating or systematizing retrofits to a NFIT standard, or is it NFIT standard or close to NFIT?
I think it's essentially NFIT. Yeah. So it's applying NFIT to the Energy Sprung concept.
Very good. Glad you got home, and awesome to be able to go and check out what's going on in Europe, and kind of back to where a lot of it started for a lot of people. And also kind of nice that you had a bit of time to hang out in New York. So we're going to be talking a bit about what's going on in New York State this week. But before we do that, we'll do a shout out to our sponsors.
Yes, indeed. Starting with our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So big thank you to NYSERDA. Thank you, too, to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Glavel, Ingui Architecture, Minitaire, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stillcorp, and Zola Windows. And thanks to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, Proseco, and Source 2050.
Awesome. All right. Tell us a bit about the NYSERDA Buildings of Excellence.
Yes. Well, the Buildings of Excellence is a really important initiative that's been going on now for 4 years. It kicked off in early 2019. There have been 4 rounds of the Buildings of Excellence competition. And during that time, $58 million have been dispersed in monetary awards have been dispersed to winning projects. And it's meant to recognize and reward and spur on the design and construction and operation of clean, resilient, and carbon neutral multifamily buildings in New York. So it's creating this really important proof of concept in New York, also a kind of a catalog of projects and with lessons learned that people in New York can learn from. But not just New York. It's really it has a national impact and beyond. Because these are really significant buildings that are solving problems that are kind of not necessarily specific to New York, right? So it's a really important initiative, and I think is responsible. I mean, I think that it can you can draw the line back to buildings of excellence when you're looking at this. The really exciting progress that's happening with New York State Energy Code, with buildings, even down to Massachusetts with what's going on there. There's all of these different communities and states and cities and countries. We're all learning from one another, and so it's just there's the just some really amazing projects. So NYSERDA had its round 4 award ceremony last week, and the Passive House Accelerator had the honor of helping to produce that award ceremony, and particularly broadcasting the live stream of the ceremony. And then I had the chance to catch up with a number of the award winners, as well as a couple of the keynote speakers from the event, and ask them about their experience and how the Buildings of Excellence program has had an impact on their work, and also some specifics about their projects and their really diverse, interesting kind of group of buildings that are being recognized this year. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so people can check that out. There's, I think Jay's put an article up on Passive House Accelerator website about the Building of Excellence Round 4 award winners, and links, a bit of information, a video there about the awards, and also some information about those winners, which feature in today's episode, which is great. Couple of things before we have a listen. You mentioned there about the funding, and this has been going on for a few years. Was this is pre Inflation Reduction Act, or was it completely separate?
That's right.
To the Inflation Reduction Act, isn't it? So I guess that's an indication of how forward-thinking New York State is in general, but particularly the work that's going on around this type of initiative.
Right, and at NYSERDA, and how important buildings are in realizing the climate goals of the state too, and I think NYSERDA really understands that, and then also how critically important a tool Passive House has become, both the PHI Passive House certification, as well as the FIAS approach. I think that all of the winners this year were Passive House projects. I believe that's the first time that's happened.
Right, and so a lot of them were talking about Enerfit, because many of them were retrofitting, changing the use of existing buildings and upscaling them, which is fantastic, because that ties back into what was going on in Innsbruck, but also I know that it's a big focus around the world of people figuring out what to do with existing buildings, which is really, really important. Hard work to do, but really important work. One of the things that I remember, the first interview here, Ilya mentioned about the fact that what their work's been going on for only 5 years, which is a relatively small amount of time, but reflecting on that huge impact that has already occurred during that time and the changes that they've seen in the industry with some of those things you mentioned around awareness of carbon, but also more and more people doing passive houses, not quite standard, but definitely incorporating it into their practice. And I think that's really exciting, and I think we often forget. Been around for. You mentioned you've been, last time you went to Innsbruck was 13 years ago, but there's been this sort of almost it's a non-linear growth
Yes.
in the last few years of uptick of really full-on energy efficiency programs.
Yes, absolutely. And we also, see the graphs that come from FIAS as well as PHI in terms of the growth of passive house or passive building certified square footage.
Yeah.
And that those are growing exponentially in North America and elsewhere. We were just talking the other day about wanting to seek out similar. What is the data for New York State? Because there's no question that line is it's probably a steeper exponential growth curve than nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a bunch of these big buildings that are either being constructed new or being retrofitted, and it comes at a really critical time as well with the local law 97, starting to take effect, and the emissions caps that's a New York City law that caps building carbon emissions, and those caps get more and more stringent over time. So that passive houses is a really great way to future-proof buildings, and so to have this cohort of successful buildings to point to that where we can say, hey, because there's going to be political pushback on local law 97, undoubtedly, as building owners start to feel a little pain because they have to either bring their buildings up to snuff or start paying penalties. To have this cohort of successful projects to point to is also going to be really, really helpful. That's not the purpose of the Buildings of Excellence project, but it is a really it's like a happy occurrence that is happening right now.
Well, I really like the term demonstration building because that implies that they are there to be shown and for other people to learn from them, which I definitely encourage people to do, to go and check these out and look into all the details. Have a listen to these speakers because there's some really inspiring and interesting stuff there. Just picking up on the resilience, one of the projects talked about the designing for the future and recognizing that they're in a future flood zone, which is an interesting concept, knowing because we know where the likely places are to be susceptible to sea level rise and coastal inundation, those sorts of things. May not be a problem now, but we can predict within the likely life of a building to say, okay, well, what was this building look like if there's a flood? And what does that mean for the use of the lower sections of that building? So that was interesting hearing that being talked about. There are a couple of other terms that people should listen out for in this series of interviews. I hadn't heard trauma-informed design before. That sounds like a pretty fascinating concept, and unfortunately needed, but really interesting to see how that's being implemented and some of the thinking that's going into what kind of people are going to need homes and what does that mean for the design of those homes.
Yes, and we're about to release probably in the next couple of weeks, a new video story on Reimagine Buildings channel about the Rise, which is another example of trauma-informed design. I think the Rise one was a round 3 Buildings of Excellence winner, if I remember correctly, and it's a multifamily building designed for formerly incarcerated women. So there's some really great insights from the folks at Magnuson Architecture and Planning about trauma-informed design. So it was new to me as well, and it does seem like it's something that is on the minds of more and more designers.
Yeah, and we've talked about prefabrication, retrofitting, big themes through here. Also affordability and looking at ways to make housing affordable and senior focused housing as well. I think there's going to be an increase in demand for that. The ability to take an existing building, retrofit it using prefabrication to a passive house standard, and then deliver it at below market rates to a specific cohort, I think is just joining up so many dots and providing a pretty amazing solution. And if you can make that replicable, and that was another feature of these design awards, is saying, well, what can be used here by other buildings in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. That's pretty massive, and that's also why I think the work of NYSERDA is really important. And then just one other thing to listen out for. One of the last interviews here talks about Blackwater heat recovery. Hadn't heard about that before.
Using our poop to heat water.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. But also, it wasn't just that; it was recovering or making use of some of the heat from a market nearby. And also extending that out to saying, other buildings in the area, how can we utilize some generation on the roof of those buildings? So just thinking about, it's kind of systems thinking at a larger scale than just an individual dwelling, but not just an individual building, but looking at a precinct and saying, what are the inputs to this system and what are the outputs, and how can we minimize both?
Ed Edinger's kind of framing of circularity, I think, is really great.
Anyway, that's probably enough lead in. There's some really good stuff in here. It's short, sharp. It's a little bit different from our longer interviews. So I wanted to get in early and just give people the heads up to look out for those concepts. So let's jump into it. I think you do a pretty good intro to each of these, Zach. So we'll just roll the tape.
I had the privilege of talking with Ilya Azarov, Fellow of the AIA, at-large Director of AIA National from 2023 through 2025, AIA New York State President in 2021, Founding Principal of Plus Lab Architect PLLC, and Professor at the New York City College of Technology, about the impact of the NYSERDA Buildings of Excellence program. He spoke about the challenges and opportunities of advancing sustainable building practices.
Ilya Azarov, it's so great to have you here interviewing right after the Buildings of Excellence Round 4 award ceremony. And you played a critical role in that ceremony. You were granting some awards to really fine projects and project teams. So just stepping back a bit, we know that we need to see a very rapid transition to clean, low carbon, resilient buildings. So what do you see as some of the key challenges to that transition, and what role do you see the Buildings of Excellence program playing in helping to address those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the challenges that we face, they're extraordinary. They're not insurmountable, but they're extraordinary. We have so many impacts hitting our communities with climate change, but if you project forward, it does not look like a great future. So what I do believe is that some of the hurdles that we face, I don't want to say barriers, but hurdles we face, is how people understand for themselves that they truly can take action. And sometimes it's funding and an understanding what a true ROI looks like. And that ROI is everything from ecosystem services, social ROI, as well as economic ROI, and then the buildings themselves. And that is some of the hurdles of recognizing those things, whether it's in government, the developer, or even as a design professional, to be able to recognize that we can be the change we want to see in the world, right? So that's the hurdle. Now, your other part of the question, what this program serves, oh my gosh, you're providing examples of what a resilient, sustainable, equitable future look like. And these are tangible that you can touch. You can use as exemplars to advance this in other communities and other states, or just even with development teams to say, no, we can do this. We know how to do this. And the incentive that the state puts forward through NYSERDA, that funding is also critical. It's so critical because to get over that hump, to make that connection between can we do this? And what is the cost? That bridge, that small bridge with the technical assistance that is given by NYSERDA is a game changer. It truly is. It truly is. So I think that there's so much that's being provided here, not to mention the website. I mean, looking at that material, man.
So we're in round 4 now of the program. And I know that you've been involved for probably all 4 rounds. I know that you've been very involved. So what are you seeing in terms of the evolution of practice with buildings, and where have we come in those 4 years, and kind of where do you see this moving?
Yeah,
in terms of buildings and building practice.
So in terms of evolution, I think that there's been a greater buy-in, and there's more diverse set of applicants than we had seen in the first rounds. But there's also been this kind of refinement of the process from NYSERDA's side, the addition of these incredible things like we saw today, Passive House, as well as adding resilience into the mix and understanding the social consequences of the projects. That being said, it hits the ethos of what architects should be doing. So that genesis has really unlocked this potential in my mind. We're also seeing projects of really small scale to really large scale, where I think before, there was a struggle with the scale portion. Now we're seeing that come through. What it means for us and seeing out there in the built environment, I think that high performance buildings are becoming much more commonplace. We're not at the point yet where it's the absolute minimum, but people recognize its value. So I'm seeing that in the marketplace, more offices like my own. This is the only way to practice. So I think that advancement on the building has been exceptional. And only in a short amount of time. If we're in 4, now we're heading into 5 years. In a 5-year period with an investment strategy from the state, you've seen this proliferation. My encouragement is that the funding stream for this at the state level, I'm not only hoping that it continues, I believe that the state should double down on this or triple down on this. You're unlocking the potential to build a brighter, better future for every community out there. So that's my hope. And then figure out a way to export this to every state.
Yeah.
Somehow.
No kidding.
This is a program that is like none other that I've seen across the U.S.
Next up, I spoke with Natalie Seagriff about the Blue Ribbon-winning Livingston Apartments, a project that features trauma-informed design created in collaboration with Soldier On.
Yeah, so Soldier On is a nonprofit organization that provides supportive housing for homeless vets. So it's not just the affordable housing component, but it's also wraparound services that they would have, that they would need, medical care, mental health, job search, things like that. So it's not just about the apartment units themselves, but it's everything from site amenities, making sure it's an environment that is mentally beneficial for them. So trauma-informed design becomes a very big part of our design decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And will you be then also providing space for social services on site, or is that part of the?
Yeah. So in fact, in the existing building that we're tying into, there's an old gymnasium that got mothballed for future phase. So we're going to incorporate that for those supportive services.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned form design, and I know that this is also a Passive House project. So how does Passive House, how is that kind of jiving with trauma-informed design? Are they mutually supportive, and in what ways?
Oh, absolutely. I think in the most significant way is probably in the auditory arena, because of the wall construction of the more robust wall construction of a Passive House system. It's going to automatically lend itself to more auditory privacy. There are certain sounds that might be triggering that would be, so this would help shield a lot of that for the veterans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
Triple pane windows, the closed cell, spray foam insulation, all that just tightens things up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that you're also reaching beyond Passive House in terms of innovation, right? There, I mean, the project it will be applying geothermal and battery storage or prefabricated framing compliance.
Yep.
Could you share a little bit more about that? And are there lessons learned that you see that could be applicable to other projects? How's that playing out for you?
I think in terms of it's a holistic approach to not only utilizing the building site, which is actually very our lot line is actually quite tight, so we had to utilize as much as the underground excavation area for things like parking, things like, and then that lent itself to other integrating other things like geothermal. We're going to have air to water heat pumps, and then there are other site amenities that are going to be incorporated as well. So
yeah, fantastic.
I caught up with Fernando Villa and Sarah Bayer of Magnuson Architecture and Planning to talk about their blue ribbon winning Carmen Villegas apartment project.
I know that the project is moving beyond Passive House in terms of innovative features. So if you might expand upon that a little bit too.
Sure. Sarah Bayer, Director of Sustainability at Magnuson Architecture and Planning. And the building also has prefabricated facade panels, the entire building, including the BIPV, and ground source heat pumps for heating, cooling, and hot water. And we're looking into whether or not it needs an air source supplement to keep the ground balanced. And we're also looking at ILFI zero carbon certification through Buildings of Excellence early phase funding.
Yeah.
To see really how close we're getting to carbon neutral with that framework.
Right. And as you are exploring these different systems, and I know just from your work and your kind of mission that you have an eye toward replicability, right? And what other projects can learn from this work. So what are you discovering at this stage in terms of the kind of applicability of some of these systems in other projects?
Absolutely. The prefab panels are absolutely replicable if you think about them early in advance.
Yeah.
And definitely ground source as well. You need a couple of testing on site in early design, but that is definitely replicable. And the state is allowing, has made, understands that more deeply and has been adjusting regulations to accommodate that.
Yeah.
So definitely it's cost effective as well, including the Passive House design.
Yeah.
So
this you alluded to the community that's going to be served by this. So it's LGBTQ plus and seniors are going to be served by this building. So could we dive in a little bit to the resiliency elements project and how the building will ensure comfort and air quality in the face of some of the climate extremes that we have in the future?
Right. Yeah. In terms of the population, in general, it's senior housing, but one of the partners is SAGE, and they serve LGBTQ population. So we're going to have space for them at the ground floor, and the second floor is going to be like a SAGE community center, not only for residents, but for the neighborhood around it. And they're going to be at the first two floors of the building. And from the beginning, I think we embraced the resiliency challenges because this site in the 2080s probably is going to be affected by the flood zone. So we elevated the residential lobby to the requirements that are needed to comply. And we have in the sixth floor dedicated space as our area of refuge that I think is going to be for the residents. We have 218 units, so it's a large population. But I think the idea is that between the second floor and the ground floor, which is going to be managed by SAGE, and the sixth floor resiliency area, there will be, we're trying to address the resiliency challenges. There'll be a cooling center. We're exploring other ideas like some small hydroponic center at the sixth floor. So we have a client that is embracing all these great ideas.
Next, I spoke with Sean Flynn about the Blue Ribbon winning 3 Arts project.
Three Arts Club, which is an affordable housing gut rehab retrofit project of an existing colonial revival building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Yeah. And it's pursuing ENERFIT certification, is that right?
We're pursuing ENERFIT certification. because we received a NYSERDA Early Design Support Award, we were able to do a complete WUFI model of the existing building as a baseline to understand where we were going, what we were going to have to overcome to reach full inner fit. And we have challenges. An existing building is a challenge.
Yeah.
In this particular case, we're also in a landmark district, so we have restrictions on what we can do with our facades.
Sure.
Which is the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. We're also seeking historic tax credits to fund the work. And then we run into the demands of the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service.
Lots dynamic.
The Department of the Interior standards for that. So those are the challenges that we face. How do you make passive house interfit mesh with the demands of a historic building?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned the early design support. So that you awarded early design support last year. Is that
we were last year when auto design support?
Right.
We're very gratified to win a demonstration award this year.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's perhaps pivotal in terms of the allowing you to make this, to take this step. Or could you talk a little bit about the kind of the role that early design support and now the demonstration project support is having on the goals of the project and preserving interfit?
Well, it's allowed us to pursue a very aggressive, helped us to pursue a very aggressive approach towards energy overall. We're fully electrifying the building.
Yeah.
We are going to have a gas-fired emergency generator, but that's inevitable. But we're fully electrifying the building. We're using air source for water, domestic hot water. We're using air source through the wall units for most of the residential units. We're using where we have to, because it's a landmark facade and we can't penetrate the facade in any way or damage it. We are using split system electric heating and cooling. And in the public spaces, we're also using electric heating and cooling. We'll also be providing energy recovery ventilators and historically correct windows that perform to passive house standards.
So this is an amazing project and tackling lots of challenges at the same time. So can you talk a little bit about the why for you in going for it and taking the performance levels to this level, the resilience and the comfort? Like what's the motivation there for you as a firm?
We're totally committed to energy efficiency, to achieving the best outcomes we can. This is an affordable housing building. It will be providing homes for seniors at below market rate, far below market rate rents. It is converting an existing residential building of another type, which was a dormitory for women who came to New York to pursue careers at an era when they couldn't actually rent an apartment. It wasn't possible. And now we're going to turn it into a new type of residential building, fully electric, fully comfortable, for senior citizens, and we're very proud of that.
Next, I spoke with Mark Ginsberg about the 819 Grand project.
What we've been able to do, we led a study and had two other architecture firms, and we looked at 15 of our buildings, and with the zoning that was permitted, we could only put PV over a third of the roof because we needed fire department access, we had mechanical equipment. And we pointed this out and we said, if you allow us to do a trellis that's under 15 feet tall, but above 9 feet so the fire department can get under it, we can triple the amount of PV. And the zoning, it was called City of Yes for Sustainability, included that change. So the Grand Street project is one of the first that we are having a PV over the whole roof, because what we found is on-site net zero in a building that's more than 2 or 3 stories is impossible.
Yeah.
This will get us closer. We're also looking at putting PV in the facades of buildings, and there are now systems. It won't mean we can generate all power on site, but we can generate more of the power. And then particularly if you're doing passive house and reduce the electric needs, you're getting closer. We're just about through. We had to get a zoning change, but our clients bought this one-story bank building on the corner. They have another building, Jennings Hall, that's already there, which is senior housing. And so we're building this new building that will connect into the existing share courtyard, share community space. Also, the new building will have a resilient community room, so if there's a blackout, people can put medication, charge their phones, etc., in a place, and creating a real sense of community and creating senior housing, which is desperately needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you this is not the first year that you're winning awards for the Buildings of Excellence. So could you say a little bit about the impact that the program's having
Well,
on your practice?
it is a wonderful carrot.
Yeah.
The affordable housing community in New York City and New York State in general is doing pretty energy efficient building.
Yeah.
But people are somewhat nervous of pushing the envelope, and winning an award with money has allowed us to go to clients and say, hey, we should apply for this. And if we get this, we can do this. So it's been really good to help us work with our clients to push the envelopes and be that little bit of push that gets the clients to commit to things they want to do, but they obviously are conscious that they're going to run a building. They have to at least break even.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so this is a help.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it's been a particular help in the last few years with the inflation and construction costs, is that extra money has helped fill gaps.
I caught up with Ed Edinger about the Blue Ribbon winning Malcolm Shabazz Harlem project and his innovative application of circularity throughout that project.
The Malcolm Shabazz Harlem project that we'll talk about a little bit today is a wonderful example of this. We have a through lot open air market that is, a good portion of a city block that is owned and operated by the Malcolm Shabazz Mosque, which is basically a direct lineage to Malcolm X. They have this open air market now, and there's really two needs that there's two needs that bring this project to a head. One, we're going to uplift and enclose this market, which celebrates West African culture, wares, and stuff like that, and put vastly needed affordable housing in two towers that rise above on each street frontage. We're going to provide the market an opportunity to do things that it can't do with its open air capacity now. So we'll do things, we'll be able to cook, and we'll be able to access energy recovery opportunities from the cooking, from the domestic hot water, from the cooling. And since we have this mixed use project, we're going to be able to play directly into the residential affordable apartments above.
Wow. So, so you touched on some of the kind of innovations that are a big part of this project. I've got a list here that I'm hoping you'll share with us. But could you talk a little bit more about that, the market and the heat recovery and how that's working?
Yes, just to ground us in the broader context, we are passive house certifying the project.
Yeah.
Obviously market and the apartments alike. And so what we're doing is within the apartments itself, we're going to use black water source heat pumps. One of the threads that we'll talk about here a little bit is maybe circularity and also partnership. So let's ground domestic hot water in the concept of circularity. We're going to take literally the wastewater stream from toilets and bathrooms upstairs, use that to power ultra efficient heat pumps that do the domestic hot water for the entire building. And to add heat to that system to take the efficiency to the next level, we have refrigeration racks in the market that we're going to take the waste heat and send to that system. And we'll actually be able to take the coefficient of performance over 4, which is for a heat pump system, a number you don't get to see that often. If I could, I like to always close with a challenge, right? And try to challenge all of us within industry and beyond to try and think the way that I'm kind of talking, let's say, we have to push. We're not entitled. We are pulling the manufacturer to what we need to get these package systems to go passive, to naturally ventilate this market with operable skylights that are also doing daylighting is not a right with DOB. So we have to file a code determination to make that work the way the code works. And there are a couple of spaces where we've been able to work with the city of New York specifically to get that to happen within the context of the Climate Mobilization Act. But the challenge for us is to not be afraid to push for more, push for circularity, ask the question that no one else is asking to really push us to where we need to land.
Lois Arena, Director of Passive House Services at Stephen Winter Associates, wrapped it up with her thoughts about the impact of the Buildings of Excellence program.
So you have this kind of front row seat on what's happening, this transition from fossil fuel, dirty, carbon-intensive buildings, often unhealthy buildings, to cleaner, more resilient, low-carbon buildings. And I know that you've seen the impact that the Buildings of Excellence program has had kind of on that transition here in New York and on the ground. So could you talk a little bit about like the importance of that and what role this program has had in New York?
Absolutely. So it took people who were a little hesitant because they didn't know what the additional costs were going to be to achieve these levels of efficiency, and it allowed them to take that step. And so because of it, we have databases full of project information, cost information, lessons learned that we can offer. You know, we're happy to tell you what didn't work so you don't make the same mistakes again. So I think that, and it's exciting because it's not just our New York projects that I point to that database, it's everybody in the surrounding area, Boston, Massachusetts, Connecticut, everybody. I'm like, go here, you'll see it's been done before. And that relieves people, like it gives them some confidence to move forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as you're looking then to the future and what the kind of next challenges are for this transition to these better buildings, what is that challenge, and what do you think we need to do to tackle that?
Yeah, so there's the really difficult ones are the existing buildings, especially in the urban areas where you have the setback control and, you know, you're at property line already, and how are we going to do that? How do you get ventilation in those? You know, how do we do? And the other really big thing that people don't understand from a multifamily perspective is domestic hot water. It is an enormous part of the load in the building now that we've crushed heating and cooling. And so how do we actually, what's the next step in domestic hot water's life? You know, how do we crack that? Because we're already with efficient equipment. So, and it's still an enormous load. So what do we do? So like, those are kind of the areas that we're constantly being challenged in. I think, you know, if you're scared to try this, just, you're not the first one that's done it now. There's so many examples. Go to the website, check out the projects, talk to the teams. All of the contact information is there. Reach out. Everybody's always willing to share in this community. So take the step.
A fantastic round of interviews, Zach. What was it like being at the awards?
It was great. It was super fun. You know, before the interviews, I was helping to run the event, especially the kind of behind the scenes stuff for the live stream. So that was very intense, but smooth and fun. But yeah, the chance to connect with these leaders. I mean, these are, you know, when you think about the transition to clean and resilient, climate positive buildings. These are, you know, these folks are at the top of their game and at the vanguard of the whole project. So it was really an honor to be able to connect with them all.
Yeah, that was one thing I didn't mention at the top was there were a few people that mentioned carbon, but in different ways. You know, looking at net zero carbon or near zero, and there's a degree of pragmatism with that, particularly some of these retrofit buildings, recognizing that it may not be possible, at least not yet, to get to net zero, but also recognizing that getting as close as you can is a good idea. So don't not try because you can't go all the way, but look at how much you can go down that path, and also recognize that there might be things that come along in the near future that could be retrofitted again or help improve that even further. I really like that the thinking around circularity as well, not just about carbon, but all the other resources, including things like heat and materials. So some really good thinking, and I think it's fantastic. I want to encourage everyone to think of this as not just a New York project. NYSERDA is doing some incredible work. They have been and they continue to do, not just in supporting the Passive House Accelerator, but just with things like this and the funding that goes into these and the impact that that's having. But I really want to encourage everyone from wherever you're listening to this to go and check out those projects and see what might be applicable to projects wherever you happen to be working in the world, because we're all facing very similar challenges, and there's incredible learning there to be, and inspiration as well to be had.
Yeah, well said. And we'll include a link to the NYSERDA's list of project winners, as well as a number of articles that we've published at the Passive House Accelerator, written by Jay Fox and Mary James and others, so that people can dive in a little bit deeper and see some nice images.
My hope for that as well is I'm talking to our audience, which is weighted towards designers and builders, people in the industry. But I really encourage people to share some of these stories when you get a chance to your clients, who might be larger developers or policymakers and people who are responsible for urban planning and precincts. Because the more that we can spread the word to those people, basically people with money or in control of projects, then that's where some of this inspiration can really take hold and make better buildings all around the world. Awesome. What have we got coming up, Zach?
Well, on April 17th, we have a presentation by Corey Habecker of Holst Architecture about a Bhutan law library, bridging tradition and passive design. So that's going to be a really cool one. We got a little preview of it actually at Reimagine Buildings 24.
I was going to say that sounds familiar at some small hour of the morning.
That's
for
right.
me. I think it was.
That's right, and it was it was the middle of the night for most people in North America as well. So we'll do that in the middle of the day this time.
Perfect.
So Corey will be joining us. And then on May 17th, inspired by Reimagine Buildings 24, we are going to be doing Reimagine Buildings Live Prefab. So this is going to be more like a 4-hour conference that will be similar to Reimagine Buildings 24 in terms of the format, with these shorter, really impactful presentations and opportunities for everyone to connect with the one, in networking and the same kind of like production values that we brought to Reimagine Buildings 24. But it will be shorter and focused on one theme, which is prefab. And we'll be looking at the opportunities and pitfalls around prefab, and specifically how prefab can help you, the ways that you can harness prefab to achieve passive house design, passive house buildings, and also low embodied carbon buildings. And we'll be involving some of the leaders, both in manufacturing as well as in design, to talk about that and kind of share their learnings. So we're really excited about it, and we hope people will join us on May 17th.
Awesome. Well, I see that Mary and Ilka have been busy. Thanks to Source 2050, they've published a bunch of special bonus episodes from Innsbruck. So I think some more of those will be popping out as well in the feed.
Yes, indeed.
So you might have caught some of those already if you're listening to this. But keep an eye out or an ear out for those. And we will be back again next week with a regular episode of Passive House Podcast.